Titanic had many fascinating locations aboard that we could discuss for hours. Not just about the decor, but also what happened there during the voyage, and many other captivating details that we wish everyone knew about. So let's have an inaugural quick Titanic University lesson, a crash course if you will, on some intriguing facts about Titanic rooms. Café Parisien. Located aft on B deck, the Café Parisien was a brand new amenity introduced on and unique to Titanic, but it wasn't part of the original plans for this space. Like her sister ship, Titanic was fitted with a wraparound open promenade on A deck, with a second enclosed promenade on B deck split between first and second class use. When Olympic's B deck promenade proved unpopular on her maiden voyage, it was decided to convert that excess promenade space on Titanic into additional accommodations amidships, extending her existing suites to the side of the ship and more staterooms added inboard. The aft end of the B-deck promenade was initially to remain unchanged, but months later work began on converting the space, originally part of second class, into an area for first-class passengers to enjoy. A decision was made to expand the a la carte restaurants outward to the port side of the ship, while the starboard side would be converted into a restaurant promenade, fully enclosed and protected from the elements by a steel screen with large windows, allowing passengers to enjoy the sea view. This design can be seen on the first draft of Titanic's accommodation plans. Thankfully, the restaurant promenade plan was short-lived. As Harlan and Wolff and White Star probably remembered, the excess promenade space was the reason they redesigned B-Deck in the first place. So they went back to the drawing board and soon found a much better way to utilize the space. The designers and artists at Alden Heaton & Company, the firm responsible for most of Titanic's lavish interiors, quickly drew up designs and concept sketches for what would eventually become one of Titanic's most famous features. The Café Parisien that we all know and love first appeared on the revised accommodation plans of Titanic that were printed in March 1912, just a month before her maiden voyage. What was originally a bare steel and undecorated promenade had been transformed into an elegant and fashionable retreat for the wealthiest among Titanic's first-class passengers. It was an impressive space, spanning 84 feet in length. Every inch of its walls and even the ceiling were covered by a trellis of French design, seemingly painted a light and delicate shade of mint, upon which artificial ivy was fitted to complete the effect of a thriving garden. Leather-cushioned wicker chairs and oak tables lined the outboard and inboard walls, giving the cafe a total capacity of 58, with tables for 2, 3, and up to 4 guests. Large china cabinets stood at either end of the room, with a buffet in the center. To keep her passengers warm during cold crossings, a couple of steam heaters were fitted on the inboard side. Despite Titanic's brief career, the Café Parisien proved to be a success, and in 1913 Olympic would receive her own unique version, which differed considerably despite the similar design. A Café Parisien was also planned for Britannic, but scrapped early in the design process in favor of a larger restaurant. The D-Deck Reception Room. The reception room on D-Deck was without a doubt the most popular space aboard Titanic, with simple and elegant paneling and a thick, rich carpet. Groups of wicker chairs and plush, comfortable sofas dotted throughout gave the space a light, airy, and relaxing atmosphere, especially during afternoon tea and after-dinner coffee when the ship's band struck up cheery ragtime and timeless waltzes. But perhaps the most striking feature of the room was the plethora of potted parlor palms, for which it was lovingly nicknamed the Palm Room by some of its patrons. Not to be confused with the Palm Court on A deck. These plants were all alive, kept in pots situated in finely carved dark mahogany stands, which varied in shape from square to octagonal in design. Early in Olympic's career, the number of palms was minimal, with no more than a dozen on either side of the room. But during her first refit in the autumn of 1911, following the Hawke collision, the reception room received its first major changes. It was enlarged, expanding the amount of available seating, and the number of palms greatly increased as well. More mahogany stands were brought in, and planters were added in the corners. However, the most notable of these new additions were large, white-painted mahogany jardinières at the base of the columns that ran down the length of the room on either side. They increased the number of plants drastically, making the reception room seem like a veritable jungle. While these jardinières were first thought to have been fitted on Olympic during her post-World War I refit, which took place in 1919 and early 1920, additional research and discoveries have revealed that they were fitted much earlier in her career. Large clusters of palms around the columns are visible in the background photos taken in late 1911 showing the lift lobby, and recently a 1914 brochure was discovered and sold on eBay, which shows the new jardinières much more clearly. Many of these changes made to Olympic were carried over to her sister, Titanic. Her reception room was enlarged, and during interior exploration of the wreck in 2001, some of the corner planters were found to still be perfectly intact. Sadly, thick layers of silt covered the floor, thus obscuring the low jardinières, but given all the evidence, our team strongly believes they were present on board Titanic. The smoking room. The first-class smoking room aboard the Olympic-class liners was described by Shipbuilder magazine as, without a doubt, the finest apartment of its kind on the ocean. This high praise was certainly well earned. These rooms on Olympic and Titanic were paneled in rich mahogany with mother-of-pearl inlays. Dozens upon dozens of stained glass windows adorned the walls, and the main centerpieces were the paintings hung over the coal-burning fireplaces. Each sister featured a unique masterpiece by maritime artist Norman Wilkinson. Olympic had Approach to the New World, depicting the entrance to New York Harbor, while Titanic sported Plymouth Harbor. These paintings couldn't have been more different. Olympic's was a scene of an atmospheric sunset of the bustling port of New York City, while Titanic's a colorful and peaceful view of Plymouth Sound, complete with a variety of watercraft ranging from tiny rowboats to a glorious cruiser cutting through the waters. The paintings were commissioned for the ships by Lord Peary himself, and once aboard, they were admired by some of the wealthiest and most influential men of the age. During Titanic's short voyage, Plymouth Harbor was enjoyed by the likes of J.J. Astor, Benjamin Guggenheim, Charles Hayes, and Isidor Straus. But did you know that among the painting's admirers on board the liner was the artist himself? Norman Wilkinson happened to be in Southampton on April 10, 1912, and visited Titanic at her berth as she was preparing to depart on her maiden voyage. He turned to his friend and suggested that they go aboard for a quick look around, and soon they were ascending up the gangway. Mr. Wilkinson and his friend were given a warm welcome in the private sitting room of Captain E.J. Smith, with whom the artist was acquainted, having sailed on Adriatic under his command in 1909. Wilkinson remembered Captain Smith radiating with Edwardian confidence, but his duties before departure left him little time for visitors, and he soon handed them off to one of the pursers, who took them on a tour around the splendid ship, as Wilkinson remembered her. He must have beamed with pride when the purser took them through to the first-class smoke room, when he saw his masterpiece hung above the white marble fireplace, protected from all the smoke behind the pane of glass. But soon the cries of "all ashore" meant that their time aboard had come to an end, and Wilkinson and his friend disembarked. They would remain at the dock to watch the new liner set sail. "None of us had the slightest fear for her safety," he later wrote in his memoir. "She was the last word in modern efficiency and was said to be literally unsinkable." It was just 5 days later when the news of Titanic's loss broke in England. The splendid ship was gone, taking the lives of 1,496 people. In memory of the ship, and those lost with her, Wilkinson painted this haunting scene of the disaster shortly afterwards, depicting the liner's last moments of life before plunging into darkness. Wilkinson's masterpiece was lost with the ship, the only remaining trace of the painting being a single photo taken before it was set off to Belfast to be fitted on board. Plymouth Harbor remained a mystery for decades following the sinking, and it wasn't for another 84 years when the world got to see it again. In 1996, Rodney Wilkinson, Norman's son, carefully studied his father's notes and sketches to recreate the painting in all its glory for the first time since 1912. That copy is on display at the Sea City Museum in Southampton, located close to its companion, Approach to the New World, which was taken off Olympic and preserved when she was scrapped in 1935. A second-class playroom. Titanic's second-class passengers are often overlooked in retellings of her story, their position not being viewed the same way as the dramatic contrast between first-class millionaires and third-class immigrants. They were also the smallest of the classes, with just 284 passengers traveling on the maiden voyage, a considerable number of them being children. As soon as the voyage started, new shipboard friendships were formed, and the children quickly made themselves an onboard playground in the form of the aft second-class staircase, situated just outside the library on sea deck. Passenger Lawrence Beasley would recall that while enjoying a book, he could see the children at play through the aft-facing windows of the room. Through the windows, there is a covered corridor, reserved by general contest as the children's playground. And here are playing the two Nevotril children, with their father, devoted to them, never absent from them. Of course, none of the passengers knew that Mr. Michel Nevotril, traveling under the assumed name of Charles Hoffman, and in the midst of a rather nasty divorce, had kidnapped his two young sons. Their mother, Marcelle, had custody, but allowed them to visit their father after he complained that she never allowed them to visit on holidays. When they came to visit him for Easter, he decided to run away with them to America, leaving their mother behind with no idea as to where they had gone. Mr. Beasley also saw another family, likely the Wests of Bournemouth. In the same corridor is a man and his wife with two children, and one of them he is generally carrying. They are all young and happy. He is dressed always in a gray knickerbocker suit, with a camera slung over his shoulder. Edwig and Ada West were moving with their daughters, young Constance and Barbara, to Florida, where they hoped to establish an orchard. The enclosed promenade surrounding the staircase and library proved popular with the kids as well, keeping them protected from the chilly air outside. As Titanic steamed onward to Queenstown on the morning of April 11, 1912, Mrs. Juliette LaRoche sat down to write a final letter home to her father in France, in which she described what the two young girls were up to. At the moment, they are strolling on the enclosed deck with Joseph. Louise is in her pram, and Simone is pushing her. They already have become acquainted with people we made the trip from Paris with, a gentleman and his lady and their little boy too, who is the same age as Louise. Simone was so funny. She was playing with a young English girl who had lent her a doll. My Simone was having a great conversation with her, but the girl did not understand a single word. People on board are very nice. Yesterday, they both were running after a gentleman who had given them chocolates. She and her husband Joseph were moving to Haiti after he struggled to find work in France due to racial prejudice. They originally planned to sail on the SS France, set to enter service just a week after Titanic, but instead decided to sail on the new White Star liner due to the French line's child's policy and their dining saloons, which required children to eat separately from their parents. Sadly, the days of fun and play on board were short-lived, and though these children were all saved, their fathers would all be lost in the disaster. The Squash Court. Olympic and Titanic's immense size allowed for a variety of features that had never been tried on ocean-going vessels before. One of these was the large squash court located on G-deck, complete with a viewing gallery for spectators located on the deck above. It was exclusive for the use of first-class passengers, tickets obtained through the inquiry office. The court was under the supervision of attendant Frederick Wright, and his patrons included Mr. J. Bruce Ismay, Colonel Archibald Gracie, and other athletic passengers. But perhaps the most interesting patron wasn't even from first class. 22-year-old Charles Eugene Williams, a professional British racket player who had won the title of world champion the year before, was traveling in second class to defend his championship title in a match against Mr. G. Standing, to be held in New York on April 29th. Despite holding a second-class ticket, Charles was determined to keep up his exercise during the crossing, and somehow managed to get into the squash court. Perhaps he got on the purser's good side, and explained his position as the reigning world champion, on his way to defend his title, and thus was permitted to use the court after hours. The percentage of passengers demanding the court late on Sunday night was small, minuscule actually, and Charles would have been making good use of it that evening, practicing and making sure he wouldn't be lacking for his upcoming match. He would be the last known person to ever use it, leaving at around 10:30 p.m. and returning to second class, where he spent the rest of the evening in the smoking room. At 11:40 p.m., feeling Titanic's impact with the iceberg, he rushed out on deck just in time to see the berg drift astern into the dark, crumbling as it went. Charles was one of only 14 second-class men to survive the disaster. When 5th Officer Lowe was helping women and children into Lifeboat 14, he likely spotted Charles in the crowd near the boat. Being short on crew at the time to row the boat, and upon seeing the athletic-looking chap, he ordered him in to help row, making Charles one of only a handful of men who were allowed into the lifeboats on the port side of the ship. After Titanic disappeared under the waters, Officer Lowe transferred most of the women and children out of his boat, and decided to go back to search for any survivors. Charles volunteered to remain and row the boat, helping to save an additional 3 lives. Well, I guess that wasn't actually a quick lesson, but hopefully this was an eye-opening one for someone out there.